One of the most popular phrases in like the manosphere and red pill circles is this idea of like, she's not yours, it's just your turn, right? On the surface, that seems practical, seems logical. It seems like an accurate reflection of what's going on in reality right now. But the truth is, it is a very weak mindset, okay? And believing in that mindset can actually create a reality that you do not want. What do I mean by that? How can believing in something that is somewhat true actually hurt you? Well, first thing we have to acknowledge is, how true is it, right? Like, sure, there's truth to it. There's truth to, if you get with a woman, you probably are just renting her. She's going to be around temporarily. That's a true statement, right? But is that always true? Is it always true? Are you 100% guaranteed, if you date a woman or if you marry a woman, that she will eventually leave you? No. If that were true, all marriages would fail. All marriages don't fail. If that were true, all relationships would fail. All relationships don't fail, right? So first we have to acknowledge that one, that's not 100% true, okay? And I would even go as far as to say that believing that to be true, making that part of your worldview, is actually going to lead you to a bad situation. The reason for this is beliefs are powerful. That's something I really need y'all to internalize. Beliefs are powerful because beliefs will strongly influence your perception, right? Beliefs will often become self-fulfilling prophecies because they influence your behavior. You take a man and you give him the belief that she's not yours, it's just your turn. Think about how that actually will play out in reality. What kind of actions will that man take, given that's his belief, right? And our actions typically align with our beliefs. That man likely will not vet women, right? He likely will not try to seek out quality women, try to figure out her blueprint and if her values and belief systems are ones that will map towards a successful long-term relationship. Because why would he put in that work? Doing that work is hard. Why would you put in the cognitive effort of assessing a woman if you think the outcome is just going to be that she will eventually leave you? You won't do that, right? So if you're not doing that, you're likely going to pair up with low quality women. And if you pair up with low quality women, there's going to be a higher probability that she is going to match that belief, right? She's going to be the type of woman who will leave you. Then you'll get left, which then will reinforce that belief. It's a problematic thing. And it's one thing that a lot of men haven't addressed, right? You have to have a mental reframe, right? Instead of believing that a woman that you deal with is guaranteed to leave you, even though there's truth to that, you should flip your belief. I used to be this way. I used to be someone who was obsessed with truth, right? I wanted to know what was true. I wanted to understand the world. I wanted to understand this reality that we inhabit. And then I came across a video by Tom Bilyeu. For y'all who don't know who Tom Bilyeu is, he started the company Quest Nutrition. He was one of the founders of that company, billion-dollar company. And he has this idea where you should believe things that are useful, right? Because your beliefs tend to, again, influence your behavior. If you believe something that is at a higher paradigm than what another person believes, you'll likely achieve better outcomes than that individual. So when I heard him talk about believe what is useful, not what is true, it kind of unlocked another level of thought for me, right? I saw the value in it. I saw the value in putting your energy into a belief system that actually aligns with the outcome that you want. Because the reality is, you're likely not going to experience a reality that contradicts your belief systems, right? Now, the caveat here is very important to understand. You do want to believe in what is useful, but you don't want to ignore reality. It's kind of a paradox, right? You still need to embrace reality, but at the same time, intentionally believe in something that is going to get you the result that you're looking for. I've talked about this topic before, and the guy responded by saying, well, the guys who actually believe that are the ones who actually experienced it. It was the guys who actually got married. It's the guys who got in relationships, believing that the woman would be faithful to them, and then they got left. Therefore, the whole idea of she's not yours, it's just your turn came about. I thought it was a really good point. But what's not being factored into that perspective is those guys believed in a fairy tale. They believed in a fantasy. okay? They didn't acknowledge the realities of women. They didn't acknowledge the realities of the dating market. And therefore, they experienced a bad situation, right? A lot of people who consume my content think that I'm anti-red pill. And that's not entirely accurate. The red pill has its uses, right? It was necessary for men to start to understand the realities of women, how women are wired. The fault of the red pill is that it tends to be black and white, and we live in a world of shades of gray. So if you remove nuance from the equation, you're not going to perceive reality accurately. So those guys that the guy brought up in that example are often men who assume that if they got into a relationship with a woman, assume that if they married a woman, then she would be loyal, no matter what behaviors he engaged in, no matter how much he neglected her, no matter how much he let himself go, got off his purpose, no matter how much he lost frame, that the woman would stay with him. That is an incorrect assumption, right? Again, you're living in fantasy land. Instead, the better approach would be to believe that you are the exception to the rule, right? Believe that it is possible for you to find women who actually can be in a long-term relationship with you. And at the same time, you acknowledge the realities of women. What does that mean practically? That means you stay on your purpose. That means you stay in the gym. That means you stay being on your P's and Q's with your business, right? That means you learn to keep frame. That means you don't divulge into, being involved in her with her emotional chaos, right? You rise above it. You remain the calm within the storm. Doing these things are the best of both worlds. Yes, you are acknowledging the differences that men and women have, and you're making the appropriate precautions, but at the same time, you remain optimistic, because optimistic people win, bro. They win. They win, they win, they win. And a lot of guys tend to throw out these stats. They throw out stats like, okay, well, most relationships fail. Most marriages fail, right? I don't know what the actual stat is. Maybe like a little over 50% of marriages end in divorce. That's true. That's a reality that you should acknowledge. But so what? So what? That doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me for multiple reasons. The first reason is I know just how undeveloped and uncalibrated most people are. Therefore, I do not believe that I will experience the same outcomes as the average man, because I am not an average man, right? I perceive myself as the exception to the rule. But the important thing is, if you perceive yourself as the exception to the rule, you must also be the exception to the rule, right? You can't just believe that. You have to also put in the work that other men are unwilling to do, which then separates you from the pack. Consider this. 65% of businesses fail within the first 10 years. That's a worse stat than marriages, right? That's most businesses. Most businesses fail within the first 10 years. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't start a business? No, it's not what that means. You would be silly to do that. In fact, most successful, I won't say most, but a lot of successful business owners, the business owners that we look at in high regard, right, the Elon Musk of the world, would tell you that if they knew how hard business was before they entered the arena, they probably wouldn't have done so. But it was that optimism, right? It was that belief that they were the exception to the rule. That's what carried them and actually led to their ultimate success. And you must apply the same mentality to your personal life, right? Your situations with women. You are the exception to the rule. Other men may say points like, well, not just bad women leave, good women leave too. I rather acknowledge reality. I understand that, but acknowledging reality does not mean taking yourself out of the game. It's not what that means, right? It is very possible for you to get into a car accident today. It's a very possible outcome. It's likely, I would say. There's a lot of car accidents, a lot of car-related deaths that happen every year. But you still drive. You still commute to work. You still take that road trip. Doesn't seem like the stats are really influencing your behavior there. Why is that? Right? Because you probably perceive yourself as a good driver. That's the distinction. You know that accidents are possible, so you take further precautions. Maybe that means you don't text while you're driving your vehicle, right? Maybe that means you pay very close attention to what's going on. Maybe that even makes you determine what car you're going to drive. Maybe you drive an SUV because you know that if you do get in an accident, you're more likely to survive that accident. You're taking precautions, right? That's the same mentality that you have to have with dating. Because the truth is, good women exist, right? Women who are capable of devotion exist. That's why all marriages don't fail. That's why all relationships don't fail. But in order to put yourself in that scenario, you have to do two things. Acknowledge the reality, acknowledge the risk, and then also have the faith that you'll have a different outcome. And then do the work to prove or to increase the odds that you won't have that outcome. This is very simple stuff, gentlemen, and I want you all to stop with the doom and gloom mentality, because this is a weak frame to come from. It's a weak frame and it's spiritually vapid. You're taking yourself out of the game. You're admitting defeat before you even enter the arena. No great man has ever thought that way. No hero of old has ever thought from that perspective. Every story that you read of great men, whether they were mythic like a Hercules or, rooted in reality like men of American history or history, global history, right? They didn't think, well, it's probably not going to work out. No, they pressed forward anyway. They viewed themselves as being unlike other men. These horror stories didn't move them because they know that those horror stories were based on men who they were not, right? So gain back your optimism. Yes, it's okay to understand and to acknowledge that things are different now. We are quite literally living in the Great Depression of relationships. I plan on making a video about that and helping you navigate the terrain, because you need a dialed-in strategy for things to work out, considering the variables that are at play. But understand that no matter what the situation is, opportunities still exist. It was true in the actual Great Depression. Opportunities still existed then, right? People actually made money during the Great Depression. Opportunities still exist. But the only way you can position yourself to take advantage of said opportunities is if you have a belief of their existence. If you don't believe it's possible for you, it won't be possible for you. So I'll leave y'all with this. Winners find a way to win. Losers make excuses. But the good news is you get to decide which one you are. And if you need help with that, if you need help navigating this Great Depression of relationships, I have 2 slots available for coaching. I'll put the link in the description below. Talk soon.